Police enforcement. America can change. The model for our police enforcement is to protect and to serve, which was submitted by Sheriff Dorbick back in 1955 when we were originally looking for our model, which was later put on the seal permanently in 1963, which is reported by the Beat magazine in 1963. I located this information on lapdonline.org. Police in America is in a crisis, according to L. Jackson from the ABA Journal, which was reported in an article, Organizations Activists Help Drive Law Enforcement Change. In 1957, President Eisenhower put into the DOJ activity for color of law investigation, which investigated police misconduct that also encompasses less obvious wrongdoing, such as striking suspects more than necessary or threatening to harm them if they do not cooperate. The problem with this is police enforcement has been murdering civilians in response to non-life-threatening cause, but are considered as doing their job.
On Monday, May 25th, Minneapolis police officers respond to a call about a customer using a counterfeit $20 bill. Officers arrive and pull the suspect, 46-year-old George Floyd, from his car, placing him in handcuffs. Minutes later, officers lay Floyd down beside the rear tire of a police car. An officer, later identified as Derek Chauvin, places his knee on Floyd's neck. As Floyd tells officers he can't breathe, bystanders plead for his life.
Bro, hey, he's stopping his breathing right there, bro.
After approximately 3 minutes, Floyd becomes unresponsive.
America is capable of reforming the police enforcement, and other countries given evidence to their abilities to reform police in its own country. Specifically, minority population and the black and brown are being murdered by the police enforcement caused by non-justified reasons, yet they are not held accountable for the murders.
Officer Chauvin continues to keep his knee on Floyd's neck until paramedics arrive, approximately 5 minutes later. The incident is the latest in a series of racially charged confrontations in recent weeks, including the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the police shooting of Breonna Taylor, and a 911 call about a black birdwatcher in Central Park.
Please send the cops immediately.
On Tuesday, May 26th, the Minneapolis Police Department releases a statement saying Floyd physically resisted officers.
What we saw was horrible.
Police enforcement should be held accountable for their actions as any other citizen should, if not more. Not upholding police enforcement accountable leads to murders unpunished of minorities.
This man's life matters.
The mayor announces Bridget Floyd calls for justice.
I would like for those officers to be charged with murder.
By Thursday, new video reveals that 3 officers were on top of Floyd during the arrest. Governor Tim Walz activates the National Guard. On the third night of protests, crowds gather outside the 3rd Police Precinct in downtown Minneapolis. The standoff soon spirals out of control, with officers evacuating the police station just after 10 p.m. local time as protesters enter the building. The police precinct, as well as several buildings in the surrounding neighborhood, are lit on fire.
Disparities of policing of the black and brown people that have resulted in an epidemic of shootings and racial motivated tactics like stop and frisk, according to Jackson from the ABA Journal. Without any consequences for the magnitude of the actions of the police, things have spiraled and have led to more violent occurrences in response to such actions from the public. There have been months of protests over the police brutalities of the black and brown people at the heart of law enforcement from their killings, according to Jackson of the ABA. The cause of this is the failure in appropriate training requirements and the hiring process of the police that leads to the murders of the minority people across the nation without being considered murders based on police officers' reports. Police enforcement limited tactics are a direct result of these murders committed by the police enforcement that are shielded by the wording of their reports put into police enforcement reports that help avoid color of law investigations based off the wordings and techniques. With only one technique, partners agree to monitor each other's behavior at the end of a pursuit to include restraint if necessary. Simple periodic reminders officers at roll call to be mindful of the color of law investigation, according to Shaffer of the FBI Enforcement Bulletin. Another example of them being shielded by the color of law displays are in the wordings of the report. 3 officers shot and killed in transit. They were not determined whether or not their actions were justified, nor were they seen as being justified, for the 2 officers' report differed in magnitudes of wording. From one produced 500 words and the other just produced 98, according to Shaffer. In some countries, police officers require a 3-year degree with ethics and human rights classes, even a thesis paper attached to. As well, an example of this is in Scandinavia. Many other countries are given combinations of personal interviews and psychological tests to determine if they are even entrusted with the firearm or the power of the position, according to Jackson from the ABA Journal.
George Floyd gasped his last words, "I can't breathe," and ignited a nationwide reckoning on the racial injustice and police brutality that exists in our country. I can't breathe. Since then, Americans from every corner of the country, and actually people throughout the world, have taken to the streets to peacefully protest violence against Black Americans. Yet despite these protests, violence continues. We cannot accept this epidemic of injustice, which is why we will pass and send, we have passed, now, we have passed and sent to the Senate and to the President, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, so it can become the law of the land.
After Rodney King's
The United States has assisted other countries in reforming their police enforcement, so reforming its own should be possible without controversy around finances. Recreating the same resources that it has made for others should be simple for America for its police enforcement reform action. America's police enforcement contains racial biases towards its minorities that lead to murders, which need financial assistance in reforming its political enforcement. With many qualifications, according to Bailey from the Australian New Zealand Journal of Criminology, U.S. is the dominant military provider, spending over $250 million a year in programs towards development for police abroad. We should unitedly hold the idea to incorporate an understanding of reform for the vision into training for all personnel, recruits, and service officers and civilian employees. Step 1 should be developing and adapting to a policy manual, job descriptions, and performance indicators to reflect the reform objective. Step 2 should be redesign uniforms, flags, insignias, and badges to indicate police officers and the public that there is a change going on. Step 3 will be to provide resources for pilot programs that reflect the objective in regards to the required desired reform for police officers to see which work better. Step 4 will be to supervise subordinate managers closely to ensure that they are not half-hearted or willfully submersive into their support for the reform, as well as removing officers who are not committed to the reform from the position of responsibility, according to Bailey. America has finance abilities to create resources to reform the police enforcement, specifically in the appropriate hiring process, requirements, and training of police enforcement. There are rarely thoughts to de-escalate situations or how to deal with mental health crisis or implement biases on the job in regards to police training. Instead, most are trained and focused on threat elimination, according to Jackson from the ABA Journal. The ABA joins the reform and has been working behind the scenes to change the biases of the police department and